This is Tom with the Crypto Crew, and today I'm talking to an individual who had a Bigfoot encounter. Would you like to go ahead and maybe tell us where you're from, the general area you had your sighting, and tell us about your sighting?
Um, my sighting happened 10 years ago. It'll be this Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, 10 years ago in 2003. I'm in the Tazewell County, Virginia area, and the sighting occurred at somewhere around 1 o'clock in the evening. And I'm an avid bow hunter, and I enjoy bow hunting for deer. And I had pictures of a nice 12-point buck with a peculiar rack on a trail camera, and he had a drop tine on one side, which is rare for around here. So I had showed it to a buddy of mine that hunted on the ridge over from where I hunted, and told him about the buck, and he said, "Yeah, I've got that same buck on camera." And I said, "No, I won't use his name, but I said I've got he's got the same deer on his trail camera." I said, "No, there's no way you got that buck on camera, because at the top of the ridge, for almost a mile in both directions, is about a 30-foot sheer cliff, so the deer couldn't cross there, and it would be impossible for the deer to get across the ridge." And I said, "No, there's no way." He said, "Well, I've got the pictures. I'll show them to you." So he shows me his pictures from his trail cam, and yes, it's the same buck. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, well, there's got to be a cut somewhere in the cliff that they're crossing. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna find that cut in the cliff, and I'll be able to set up on that cut, and hopefully catch him going through the cut one day, and be able to kill the animal. So I went out. We had snow the day before Thanksgiving, about 3 or 4 inches on top of the mountain. It was probably about 5 or 6 inches, but then the snow kind of tapered off toward the bottom of the mountain. And I had got on my four-wheeler and went up to the top of the ridge there. And when I go in the woods, I always carry a rifle with me whenever I'm not bow hunting. I carry a .243 rifle with me. And I got up, parked the four-wheeler, and got off the four-wheeler, and made about, I don't know, went maybe 30 or 40 yards away from the four-wheeler. And, excuse me, on the four-wheeler trail, I see quite a large human-looking footprint. And I just see one. So I'm looking at that footprint, and I just see one footprint, and I'm like, I'm looking around, someone playing a joke, a prank or something. What in the world is a pretty good-sized human footprint in the snow here? And I could only see one. So I looked at it for a couple minutes, and kind of just shrugged it off like, just an anomaly in the snow or something. Maybe an owl come out of the tree and caught a mice in the snow or something that just made it look like a footprint. But, I was just trying anything to explain it away from being a footprint. So I took maybe 3 more steps down the four-wheeler trail, and I happened to look on the bank on the other side of the four-wheeler trail, and I see a second footprint. And I realize it's the opposite foot from the first footprint. So I'm like, well, that's strange. So I went back to the original footprint, and I marked it off. It was 3 of my strides to the second footprint. And the second footprint wasn't a whole footprint. It was just the toes and the ball part of the foot. So I looked ahead 3 more strides, and I could see then in the snow the trail of footprints. So I'm like, this is awful odd. So I'm like, who is up here barefooted in the snow? It's 15 or 20 degrees. What is someone doing up here? I've hunted this area for 10 or 12 years and never had ever run across a person in the woods, nothing. So I'm like, I'm going to follow these, footprints and see who it is. So I followed them for probably approximately 100 to 150 yards. And it's winter time, so there's no foliage on the trees. All there is there's some laurel thickets that are still green. So I get to close to a laurel thicket, and I can see that the strides have shortened quite a bit. They're not near as long as they were when I first found them. They're only about a stride and a half of mine now in between the footprints. So I'm coming up on this laurel thicket, and I get within about 30 to 40 yards of this laurel thicket, and I hear a pretty heavy grunt. And I'm like, that's a darn bear. That's got to be a bear, because I've heard bears, grunt and snap their teeth when they're angry and stuff. And I think that's just a darn bear, So I took my rifle off my shoulder and engaged the shell, and got within probably 25 yards of the thicket, and I could see something in the thicket moving a little bit. It wasn't moving a lot, but I could see it. It looks like its upper body was moving, but not the lower part of the body. And where it was at in the thicket, I couldn't get a real good look at it, so I started moving around to the left of the thicket, and it was hard to. It takes me back to that day. Kind of rough. And when I did, it grunted again at me, and now I'm within probably. I'm pretty darn close. I realize I'm too damn close, for a bear, and I'll put the rifle up, and I'm gonna go ahead and, shoot it. So I pull the rifle up, and I'm getting ready to shoot, and I hear something to the left of me, and it sounded like something like a bear climbing a tree. I mean, it sounded like something that was really grabbing the bark of a tree. And I looked to my left, and I thought that it was a cub that was with maybe this sow or this bear, and had ran up his tree. So I swung around to the left to look, and looking dead at me at about 30 yards is about a 5.5 foot tall, hairy man. That's all I can say. And he's got one arm. He's about maybe 15 feet into the tree, somewhere in that ballpark, and he's in a V part of the tree. And he's got his right arm is wrapped around part of the tree, and his left arm is out. And I can see his whole chest and legs, and he's only holding on to the tree with one arm. And he's got one foot in the V of the tree, and his left foot is just kind of just pushed against the tree. And I can see this individual as plain as day. And he's black, black fur, long hair on him. And it made me, I was so scared that I came close to vomiting. It scared me that bad. So at this time, I look back to the laurel thicket. I'm backing up away from this tree and the laurel thicket. I realize that something is telling me that you're in a bad situation. Your instincts or your second sense or whatever you want to call it is telling you need to back out of this situation. So I'm easing back, and about that time, the big one, which was in the laurel thicket, which I thought was a bear, stands up, and it's a male, and the one in the tree I assume is a female, because it didn't have what I would say big breasts, but I didn't see any genital male genital to it, but you could see somewhat of an enlarged breast. But it was hairy. It was hairy, enough that everything wasn't that visible on the body. Well, the one in the lower thicket stands up, and when he stands up, the lower thicket's probably 8 foot tall, and when he stands up, his head is above the lower thicket, and he's looking dead at me. And I'm easing back, and he's actually closer to me than the one in the tree is. So I'm backing up. Well, the one in the tree grunts at me. Well, when he grunts at me, I throw my rifle up and put the scope right on its chest, center mass of the chest, and I click the safety off and I let it go and busted it right in the chest. Well, when I hit it in the chest, it didn't fall out of the tree, but it came out of the tree. And when after I shot it, I turned and started to run. And as I start to turn, I turn around and look, because as I turn, I have ejected that shell, and I'm putting another shell in it, because I think that I'm going to have to fire at the big one. And I turn back and look. Well, the big one is picking the small one off the ground. And I can't believe my eyes, what I'm seeing. And it's just, so I turn around and I'm seeing this big one pick it up, the small one up, and it picks it up like it's a rag doll. I mean, grabs it by its arm and just picks it up like, and this thing probably had to weigh 500 pounds. The big one, I would guess, weighed 800 pounds, 900 pounds maybe. It was just a beast of an animal. Shaquille O'Neal don't have, it looks like a kid to this thing. So I turn, I see it, and I'm still wanting to get the hell out of there, And it turns and, picks that one up, and it starts toward the rock cliff, the sheer cliff at the top of the mountain. And this big one, grabs this rock cliff with one hand and picks itself and I don't know if it's a mate or a sibling, or I don't know what it is, and carries them both up this sheer straight rock cliff like he was, almost like he was flying. It was like he didn't even have no effort to it. Just went straight up this 30-foot rock face, in a matter of 5 seconds. I don't know if it was 5 seconds. Well, I'm turning the other direction, and my ass is I'm hauling tail back toward the four-wheeler, which I'm only about, at the time I was probably only 150 yards away from the four-wheeler, something like that. And I run as fast as I can to the four-wheeler, and I keep looking back over my shoulder, wondering if this thing is going to come. And get to the four-wheeler, don't even bother. I've got the gun in my hand the whole time. Start the four-wheeler up, and I never saw it again. Never saw it again.
Well, do you think that you actually killed the smaller one?
I know that it took a 243 round straight to the chest. I know that it took that round straight to the chest. When I pulled the trigger and saw if you hunt a lot when you shoot an animal, you will actually see the dust that comes off of an animal when you shoot it.
Correct.
And I saw the impact of the round straight to the chest. I just center mass of just below the neck, center mass, and it went to the ground. Well, I know that I hit the animal because there was blood. After I get back home, I don't live very far from where this happened. I get back home and I couldn't it just tears me up talking about it now. It's been 10 years ago, and I haven't, I never told my wife, none of them at the time, nobody, because I thought nobody would believe me. Who's going to believe that that someone just shot a Bigfoot, what you're calling a Bigfoot? They're going to mock you, and, it was just a big bear, especially up in a tree. It was a bear, and I'm just trying I'm grappling with the realization of what had just happened, and I was shaking, and it eventually, when I finally stopped, it caused me to vomit. It was my nerves, the adrenaline that I had, it caused me to vomit. I vomited when I finally stopped the four-wheeler and got back to the house. And didn't go in the house for probably an hour and a half to 2 hours. I sat out in the garage and just sat on a 5-gallon bucket and I just replayed it in my mind what had just happened. So after about an hour and a half, I went in the house. And my wife was, she visibly saw that I was upset. She's like, "What's wrong? What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Nothing. I just had something happen in the woods. Saw some stuff that didn't think was right or whatever." And she's like, "What was it?" And I was like, just probably a bear. Just didn't want for her to say, that's not what you saw, or that's not what really happened. So I didn't really engage my wife in conversation over it. I just, kept it inside for a couple hours, and then finally I sat down and watched TV, and I ended up taking a shower. And I finally told my wife, I said, "Honey, I got to tell you what really happened." And she's like, "Well, what happened?" And I told her what happened. And she said, "Well, I think you need to call the game warden and report it in case it was a bear." I said, "Yeah, you're right. I probably need to do that." So I called the game warden and told the game warden that what had happened, and I told him that I didn't think that it was a bear. That I was pretty damn confident that it wasn't a bear. It wasn't. It wasn't in my mind. There was no confusion. I know what bear look like. I've killed about 10 or 11 bear in my hunting in the time in the woods. 20 or 30 deer, bobcat, coyote. I know what the animals are here in this area. And what I saw that day, the day before Thanksgiving on 2003, was not a damn bear. Was not a bear. I don't care what anybody says. The people can mock, make fun, say I'm lying. I don't care what they say. I know what I saw on the day before Thanksgiving of 2003.
What did the fishing game? What did the fishing game say to you?
Well, the fishing game. Well, so this is where it comes strange.
Okay.
And this is why I really haven't. The part of the Bigfoot part of it is strange, but this part became even stranger. Called the fishing game, and they said, "Listen, we'll send the game warden out." Said, "Probably tomorrow before he's there." I said, "Okay." So he shows up the next day about it's Thanksgiving Day, and he shows up Thanksgiving Day around noon because we had just got done. We'd ate a early lunch before we was going to eat our Thanksgiving dinner, and he shows up, and he's not happy that he's here at my place on Thanksgiving. So he's like, "Buddy, let's get this done. I want to be home with my family too." I'm like, "Okay, it's what happened." I told him the story. Well, he starts writing down at first, he's writing stuff down, and when I tell him about that that's two of them, and that I believe it was a Bigfoot. He just stops writing, takes his notebook paper that he has, and just wads it up. I don't have time for this stupid shit. You know, I want to be home with my family. You probably saw a bear. You know, we get these reports all the time that people think that these things are out there. You know, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, buddy, if that's what you think, it's fine with me. I said, I just wanted to make the report that I had shot an animal, you know, in case another hunter finds something dead in the woods that, you know, that I shot, and I have a bear tag, you know, and that I can tag the animal if someone recovers it. So he's like, well, where did this happen? I said, it's up the mountain, you know, probably about a mile up the mountain. He said, well, would you take me up there on your four-wheeler? I said, not a problem. He said, was there blood? I said, I don't know if there's blood. You know, I said, but when I shot the one in the tree, you know, my ass was headed the other direction. You know, I put the round in it and turned around, and all I've done was turn around long enough to see the other one coming out of the thicket and pick the other one up, and then walk straight up a sheer cliff. I mean, just climb up a sheer cliff that no man without climbing equipment could go up, and much less carrying another individual that weighed at least 500 pounds up this cliff of 30 to 35, 40 feet straight up. This ain't a slope. This damn thing is straight up. And he's like, well, let's go. Take me to it. So we get on the four-wheeler and we get up there, and we stopped in the exact same location that I had stopped when the incident happened, and I showed him the footprints. He said, well, let's look, where did these prints come from? And at the time, I didn't think about where they were coming from. I was wondering where they were going. So we tracked them back to where they had come from, and we went down the mountain, and finally the snow ran out, and it got into quite a bit of mud, and you could definitely see the foot. You know, in the snow you could see them, but in the mud, these things were just beautiful. I mean, they were absolutely great footprints. If someone wanted to cast them, those were the cast to make a cast out of. And the game warden's like, this ain't right. This ain't right. So he said, let's go back up. Let's go back up to where you shot this. Show me where you shot the animal. Like, okay. And I didn't have a firearm with me when we went. And I said, sir, do you mind, you know, could you make sure you have a loaded weapon? I said, if we run across another one of these things, I said, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm unarmed. He said, don't worry about it. You know, it's not what you think. I'm like, okay. So we hiked back up and we followed the trail of, you know, the footprints out to where the little thicket was at in the tree, and there's blood all over the ground in the snow. I mean, there's a good probably two or three puddles of heavy maroon, you know, and it looked like, you know, long blood in the snow. And I'm like, see, you know, I shot an animal here, you know, but without doubt, I shot an animal. Well, he takes out a baggie that he has, and he's got a little thing around his waist, and he pulls out of like a Ziploc baggie, and he takes a handful of the blood in the snow, and he turns the bag inside out and grabs the snowball full of blood in the snow and seals it up and puts it in his back in his little sack there. And he said, well, show me where they went up the cliff, because you couldn't see because there was actually so many footprints. I guess where the big one had come out of the little thicket and kind of maybe it looked like that the other one had been drugged a little bit in the snow before it actually picked it up and climbed up the cliff with it. It looked like it had drug it, you know, its feet had drug in the snow. It was like a skid in the snow. So we walked over to the cliff, and there was blood on the cliff, and there was actually looked like four fingers that handprint on the rock, that was blood, and you could see it pretty good. And he ended up taking a picture of that. He had a camera that he took a picture of that, and then we couldn't climb over the mountain. I mean, it's a sheer cliff. And I said, the damn thing went straight up this. And he's like, well, there ain't no bear that can climb that. I said, you're not telling me nothing that I don't already know, sir. I don't want to sound like a smart ass here, but I know what I saw, and I know what I shot was not a damn bear, He's like, well, okay, if that's what you say, I believe you. I believe you. He said, you look pretty distraught and adamant that this is what happened. I said, well, I know what the hell happened. I don't have to prove it to you. If you believe me, that's fine. If you don't believe me, that's fine. That's your prerogative, your opinion, whatever, But I know what I saw. So he's like, well, take me back to my truck. He said, if anyone recovers a bear, we'll let you know. I'm like, okay. So we come back off the mountain, and he gets in his truck and leaves. He said, there may be someone else contact you over this. I said, from Fish and Game? He said, there may be another government agency that contacts you. I said, okay. And he said, well, I said, well, who are they with Fish and Game? And he said, no, he said, there'll just be another government agency. He said, they'll introduce themselves if they show up. I'm like, okay. So, which I thought was strange. He never left his card with me. Nothing. He leaves. So, probably it goes maybe a week or 7 to 8 days, something like that goes by. And I have a shop here in town, and 2 individuals show up at my work and ask to speak to me, and both are in a government licensed minivan, and they said, we need to speak with you. And I was like, well, what's this concerning, And they said, well, it's over the incident with the game warden. I said, okay. They said, you have somewhere private that we can speak? And he said, we'd preferably like to go to your residence and speak to you. I'm like, okay. I was like, well, it's almost quitting time. You can just follow me home. So I said, just give me about 30 more minutes, and y'all can follow me home. So I finished up my shift, and they followed me home, which was 3 or 4 miles from my work is where I live. And they get out of the car, and they said, they called me by my name and said, we need you to recount what exactly happened to you on the day before Thanksgiving. I said, okay. So I go through the whole thing. And one of the gentlemen was a clean-cut gentleman, had a suit and tie on, nice and polite. The other individual was a very large man, probably 6'8" or better, and he did not look like someone that would work for the government. He had long hair, kind of a scruffy beard, didn't look clean-shaven, wasn't clean-shaven at all, didn't look like a government employee, what would look. So the smaller guy, he gets done asking me the questions, and I tell him the whole story about what happened. And then the larger man says, well, do you really think that you saw was a Sasquatch? He didn't say Bigfoot. The whole time I'd never called it a Sasquatch. I'd said that it was a Bigfoot. And he said, do you think you really saw a Sasquatch? I said, I'm 100% positive that I saw a Sasquatch. He said, no, you didn't. And he was blunt. No, you didn't. I said, yeah, I did. I mean, I know what I saw, and I'm pretty confident that's what I saw. He said, no, you're not understanding me. You did not see what you think you saw. And it would be in your best interest not to tell anyone else about what you think you saw, which upset me quite a bit. I'm not too tolerant to, someone telling me what I'm going to do. So I was like, well, I don't think that that's right. I know what I saw, and, I'm not here to argue about it or anything. I know what I saw, and he said, "Well, all I can tell you is, be in your best interest if you forget the incident ever happened." I'm like, "Well, that's fine. I don't really want to go telling people that I supposedly shot a Bigfoot. It's not on my plans to go out in town and have a pep rally saying I killed shot a Bigfoot." And he said, "Well, it's best that you just keep it to yourself." And they turned around, got in their vehicle, and left.
Wow, so it kind of just forced you really to not talk about it.
He was pretty blunt. He was pretty blunt. I mean, he just implied that he didn't want me to speak about it. And for the last 10 years, the only person I ever told was my wife, and I told my father. And other than that, haven't told anyone else other than you're the third person that I've ever said anything to.
Well, the story is just amazing, and you hit on some things when you was talking about the track line, because I have found track lines, and you hit on some things that let me know that was a real track line, because they'll take the large strides, but then you also find it where they take a much shorter stride when they're just kind of, piddling around or whatever. I found that I found that myself.
Man, this thing, when I saw the first footprint, that I was on a four-wheeler trail, but it was at one time an old logging road. So the trail is a good probably 6 or 7 foot wide. It's a nice four-wheeler trail, and this thing cleared that the first footprint was all the way on the left side of the trail. Okay, and that's why I never saw the second footprint at first. That's what had me so confused. I was just looking in terms of a human stride of where another footprint would be at. Is why at first I never saw the second footprint. But until I got up and I took about 3 strides and then just happened to look on the bank on the right side of the trail, there is the second footprint. It's not a whole footprint. Like I said, it was just the toes and the kind of the ball of the of the foot where it had, and it looked like it had jumped all the way across this damn trail. I mean, and it had to clear 8 foot in this stride.
Well,
and what bothered me though was the entire time I never saw a second set of footprints. There was 2 animals, and I never saw the second set of footprints.
Did you?
I don't know if the big one or the small one. I don't know which one had made it had to have been the big one, because the big one was in the little thicket, and the footprints led to the little thicket.
Did you?
I don't know if the smaller one had come from the other direction, or had maybe come from another direction up the mountain.
Or it could have already been in the trees.
Right, it could have already been in the tree, and what it really scared me was it sounded like, I don't know if you've ever heard of a bear or a bear cub climb a tree.
Yeah, I've heard.
You
heard
can hear their claws really gripping the bark.
Right.
And that's what it sounded like, and that's what I jumped back and I thought I was going to see a bear cub scurrying up this tree, but what I saw was a damn 5. I don't know if it was 6 foot tall. But it's hard to judge because it was up in the air a good 12 or 15 feet. It was off the ground, so I couldn't really judge its height that well. It looked to be about 6 foot tall, but it was it was muscular. It was heavy. It had a lot of fur. It was heavy hair on it. I don't know if it was because it was winter time, but it was heavy hair, heavy fur, long fur, and it wasn't. The hair didn't look like it didn't have knots in it. Like a horse's mane gets sometimes. This hair looked like, not that it looked like it had been combed or anything, but it was not matted up real bad, or there wasn't briars or burrs all knotted up in it. The hair looked clean. On it.
Had you believed in Bigfoot or anything before this event?
Well, I'd really not believed in it. I was always kind of skeptical because I know how big the woods are. I spent a lot of time in the woods, and I've always thought, well, it could be out there. I mean, there's a lot of the woods that, especially out in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, there's just a vast amount of wilderness out there that no one's even stepped foot on.
Right.
Still to this day, that without a doubt, something could live out there without being discovered for a long time. But and there's all the time you hear reports, because I'm close to the Appalachian Trail. I'm probably within 10 miles of the Appalachian Trail from where I'm at, and then you always kind of hear stories and stuff of people that hike the Appalachian Trail that have said they've seen things hiking the trail or close to the trail. And I've always wondered around here, could there be one around here? But I found out the day before Thanksgiving on 2003. Yeah, they're here.
Let me ask you a couple questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Out of the two creatures, you've probably seen the bigger one, the larger one that was in the bush there. You've probably seen him better.
I saw him. He was far closer than the one in the tree.
Well, could you describe?
I mean, there was no doubt he was a male.
Could you describe his facial features for us?
Hey, he looked like a man. In the face, he was just, but his body was just so disproportionately large. I mean, his head looked bigger than a basketball. I mean, it was just, his head was massive. I mean, he had hair all over his face. Well, he didn't have hair on his nose. And he had a real, I remember seeing, when I looked at his eyes, he had like 3 or 4 wrinkles right at the bridge of his nose, and the top of his nose and his forehead come together. There was like 3 or 4 distinct skin rolls in that, right there at his brow line. And his nose looked like a man's nose. It was, it didn't protrude that much. It was more flat on his face, but it looked more like a human's nose. And his eyes, I could see his eyes as plain as day to this day. I mean, I looked at him square in the eyes, and his eyes were brown as mine are.
Was there any white in the eyes?
No, I saw no white in the eyes. His eyes were completely brown. I saw no white whatsoever. I saw no pupil in his eyes. His eyes looked completely brown.
Was you able to see any kind of like the teeth or anything like that?
I never saw no teeth. I could see his lips, though. I saw his lips, and his mouth was extremely wide. I mean, it didn't look. I mean, I know he wasn't. I know the damn thing wasn't smiling at me.
Right.
But it almost looked like he was smiling because his mouth was so wide.
Have you been back to that area?
Large.
Have you
I've been back several times.
Have you?
Back several times.
Not seen anything
I haven't
else?
seen anything, and I looked. Believe me, I looked. I mean, I looked. I didn't go back for probably a better part of. I hunted near there, within probably a half a mile the next season, but I haven't hunted directly right within a couple hundred yards of that area since then. No, I haven't been directly back to the area, but I've been within a quarter of a mile of where it happened, where I saw him.
People need to realize that they are out there.
It bothered me for the longest time that I shot it.
Well, I was going to ask you if you had remorse about shooting the one.
At the time, hell no. I didn't have no remorse. At the time, I mean, for lack of a better word, I mean, I came close to not only pissing my pants, but shitting my pants. I mean, I don't think that people can understand the fear that you feel when you encounter, because I was in a, not only I'm at the top of this mountain with not one but now 2 of these animals
Right.
Within, 50, both of these animals are within less than 50 yards of me. You realize, your brain tells you real quick that you're in a bad situation.
Right. Your life could have been took away easily.
That's right. And when that big one, when he come up out of that laurel thicket, I never seen nothing like that. People can't, until you actually see one, you cannot fathom how big they are. They're immense. His hands look like he had a Major League Baseball glove, outfielder baseball glove on his hand. His hand was that big.
Can I ask you a question about his feet?
Now, I didn't see much of his feet because he was still kind of in the laurel thicket.
How many toes?
And it's snow.
How many toes was on the tracks?
I didn't see. Well, there was 5 toes on the tracks.
5 toes.
The tracks looked identical to a human's footprint, except for just the side.
Because I know over time there've been some tracks that's been found with only 4 toes, and that's why
he had a big toe and 4 little toes.
Did you take any kind of pictures?
No, I didn't get any, but I didn't have a camera or nothing with me, because all I was doing was I was going to find the cut in the rock where the deer had been crossed. I had no intentions of hunting. All I was going to do was walk that entire ridge until I found the cut in the rocks, so I could put a tree stand in it and catch that buck.
Get that
drive
big
on
buck.
across there. I had no intentions, but I never go in the woods without a gun. I've never. Since I've been young, I've always, my father taught you don't go in the woods without some sort of protection. And I'll tell you, people can say, and one reason why, I thought about coming forward several times through the years and trying to make a report to people, but I had saw a story about a guy out in California, Justin Sameha, that had shot one. Or
Right.
she just said he had shot one and then a little one.
Right.
And the ridicule that he had went through just by making that statement. People were saying he was lying and he was making it up, and then something with the DNA was a bear. And I don't need that. I don't want that. I don't want no parts of that.
Yeah, the Bigfoot world is pretty rough.
If people believe me, that's great. If people don't believe me, that's great too. Have a nice day.
Well, I know for a fact that Bigfoot is a real creature.
I've always wondered if that animal died, because it was a dead. It was a dead center mass. I know a 243 is not the heaviest caliber
Right.
gun, but you take a dead center mass. I use a 90 grain ballistic tip shell that I shoot, and I haven't shot I've only shot several deer with a gun. Most of the time I shoot them with a bow. I'm an avid bow hunter, but every deer that I shot with that gun or bear, they died. And then a center mass, I don't care how big you are, center mass to the chest, you've got problems.
Well, would you, if you run across one now, would you shoot it now?
I would hope not. I would hope not. I would hope that I would, knowing what I know now, that I would be able to restrain myself and just admire the animal for what it is. But I don't know, if I was in the same situation, I can't say that I wouldn't done it over again the exact same way.
Yeah, because it does sound like you was in very possible danger.
Oh, I know that when the big one stood up and come out of that bush, and then the one in the tree, when it grunted, it was a different kind of grunt. It wasn't like this thing, you could feel the grunt.
Mm.
I don't know how, you know what I'm saying? It was almost like a low frequency grunt. It wasn't extremely loud. It was just a real guttural grunt.
Yeah, like a real low bass tone.
And when it done that, I was like, nope. And that's when I turned around and, it didn't take me but, a second to throw the scope up, dead center. And because I'm pretty sure it was a female. I mean, I didn't see a woman's, female's genitalia or a man's genitalia, but I could see what I thought was breast. They weren't very pronounced, but it looked. But there was so much hair covering it. I assumed that it was a female.
Quite possibly, it was a male and a female together. Usually, the males are quite a bit larger.
Yeah, and it was just the way it was hanging on to the tree. I mean, it wasn't trying to hide behind the tree. It had 1 foot in the V of the tree, and then it had its right foot in the V of the tree, and its right arm and hand holding on to the tree, and its left arm was hanging down, and then its left foot was kind of against the tree. It wasn't, it wasn't holding on to the tree. It just kind of was pushed against the tree. And I put the scope, the sight dead center, and it didn't take me but just a second. I was pulling the trigger.
Did you by chance measure the foot tracks, how large they were?
I didn't have a tape on me, but I had I had a pair of gloves on, winter gloves, and the winter gloves laid out is right at 14 inches long because it's got the glove has got the long sleeve on it.
Right.
Go up underneath your sleeve from your shirt, and when you lay it all the way out, it's right at 14 inches, and the track was probably 3 or 4 inches longer than that glove.
So it was a good size on that, yeah.
Oh, it was pretty good size, But it looked just like a human's foot, but except for, there was spots where it had stepped. It was odd because it was a couple of the footprints were flat in the ground, and then some of them it looked like it had applied greater pressure when it walked. The snow had like it had pushed off harder with its toes, and it had cupped the snow. Like its foot had pivoted in the middle and not at the ankle. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's like the foot had a break, like another joint in it. And then some of the prints were flat.
Yeah, I've seen them kind of
So
both
they were just
ways.
flat. And the damn prints were in a straight line.
Right.
They weren't staggered.
How many total tracks do you think there were?
Oh, there was probably 60 tracks in the snow. And I don't know how many tracks. I mean, when me and the game warden went back to the mud, there was probably 100 tracks.
Wow.
And there was probably another 50 where it got down to where the freeze line was at on the mountain. Because we are up pretty high in elevation here. And, then the freeze line ended, and then it become, there was no more snow and it was more mud. And once it turned into mud, man, there was just super nice. I mean, you could see the ridges in the skin plain as day in the mud. I mean, it was just perfect.
And you said the game warden took a picture of some of the tracks?
The game warden took a picture of the tracks. He took the blood. He took a snow. He balled up because there was a piece of meat in the snow. It wasn't a large piece of meat. It was maybe the size of a quarter, something like that. Maybe a nickel-sized piece of meat that was in the snow in a pile of the blood. And he had his hand. He turned the bag inside out and made a snowball, a ball out of it, and then put it inside the Ziploc bag and zipped it up and put it back in his little sack.
kind of makes you wonder what happened to that.
Well, I know what he done. I guarantee that's how they. I think it's they've tested it, and that's why the other agency come and saw me.
Yeah. And then they don't never release it, and they suppress witnesses.
Oh, they don't. You know, I asked for a card from the game warden. I asked for a card from both of the government employees. I asked them when they got there. I asked them what agency are they with. They never would tell me what agency they were with. Never gave me a business card.
Do you remember what color the van was?
Do what?
I said, do you remember what color the van was that they was driving?
It was a gray minivan.
Gray minivan with a
gray minivan
with a federal license plate.
With government license plates. I don't remember. I should have wrote the license plates down, but I was so pissed off when I got done talking to them. You know.
Right.
I wasn't worried about what their license plate of their vehicle was. I was pretty upset, you know, because the big guy basically challenged me. You know, he's like, "You understand that this didn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, you need to forget that this even happened." And that was what's so weird. I mean, now after the whole thing, 10 years down the road, the strangest part of the whole thing wasn't me shooting a Bigfoot. Is what the government done to try to suppress what I saw. I mean, I think the government knows they're there.
I do too.
And they're hiding the fact that they're, you know, but why would they hide the fact that they're there?
No, that's the big question.
I mean, it can't be over forestry reasons. I mean, I just don't understand.
Well, that's me. I don't understand why our government hides a lot of things from us, but I do know Bigfoot is real. I found enough evidence myself and had enough experiences myself that I know they're real.
Oh, and I watched the your video that you had on there with the older gentleman that walks.
Right. Yeah. Now that was right below my house.
Yeah. I think his last name was well, I don't want to say it.
Yeah, it's Terry Roark. He's my neighbor across the street.
Yeah.
But here I found out.
He goes in the woods and prays.
Right.
And when I saw that video, and I was like, man, and you know, you're pretty close to me, because for years, you know, I didn't know who I was going to say anything to.
Well, I like to try to give.
You see all this stuff on, you know, every Bigfoot thing you get on, you got these people that are fussing and fighting.
Oh yeah, I hate that.
You know, I mean, you don't know who's telling the truth or who's honest about whatever, you know, about this or that. And I saw that, and I was like, well, you know, he's from my region here in Kentucky, you know, and I'm here just, you know, I'm only about 3 hours away from you. I'm like, I'll try to contact this guy.
It's important to get your story out, but you got to be careful who you give it to. I understand that.
No, because when I told my dad looked at me like I was drunk or high or something. He's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Dad, no, you know me, you know. Come on, I wouldn't tell you this if, you know, I just wouldn't bring this up just for the goodness, for the, you know, sake of having a decent conversation with you today. You know, I'm telling you what I saw, what happened. You know."
My dad has been a skeptic too, pretty much. He kind of gave me a hard time over it, and then he had a sighting about I don't know, probably about 2 or 3 months ago now, where one went right across the road in front of him. And he waited 4 or 5 days before he told me. And he told me, he said, well, I gave you such a hard time over it, I was kind of embarrassed to come and tell you that I seen one. And and I was able to find the track line and everything on him. I found a lot of evidence of it. Made a real nice track casting, and I'm still researching the area. It's still in that same area. There's still activity there. And I'm hoping to go back there. Well, I'm going to go back there toward the end of this month and pull out some game cameras and see what I caught on those. But now this one happened.
You've got a lot more activity down there, you know, because I haven't, ever since that day, I haven't found anything in the woods that I thought I could relate to them.
Right.
You know, I haven't, you know, I've seen people, I've seen people put these videos on about stick structures and trees that are bent over, and and I mean, that part I am skeptical about. I mean, I think a lot of that stuff happens naturally in the woods.
Some of it happens naturally, but I have found some stuff during this investigation that my dad seen. I found some stuff that they actually do where they actually have broke limbs. I have found the large X they make. I found some of that. And a lot of it's in a little documentary film I made a little while back. There's quite a bit of evidence in it. And they do some weird stuff. I don't
I'll tell you one thing. This cat had to be. I mean, the one that I shot had to weigh at least 500 pounds, without a doubt. Had to weigh 500 pounds, and he probably was pushing 800 to 900 pounds, and he went up that rock. I mean, Tom, it was straight up, buddy.
Yep.
I don't know how to explain it other than, I mean, this thing was straight up. And there's no vegetation on it. It's nothing but a straight rock face. And this thing went up that rock face like a bird flying up it. I mean, when I saw him go up, I almost didn't believe what I was seeing when he went up it. And the other one was holding on to him, and it was just straight up it. Just straight up it, like it was no effort. There was no effort involved. But the one I saw, it could pick a full-size pickup truck up off the ground and flip it over and do whatever it wants to.
Right.
You couldn't hide in your vehicle and think that you're protected from it. It would tear the doors off the hinges. Without a doubt. I mean, it's the most powerful creature I have ever saw. Without a doubt. I mean, I've killed a 500-pound black bear, and that black bear that thing would have swatted that black bear like it was a flea. Massive. It's just, it had to be. I would guess that he was 5 foot wide at the shoulders.
That's big.
Across his shoulders, he was. I'm almost 6 foot tall, and he was almost as wide at his shoulders as I am tall.
That's big. There's not much you can do with something that size.
I mean, and just massive. But his eyes was brown. Just brown. I saw no pupil, and now I know this might sound strange. He blinked, and it looked like, to me, I don't know, that he had a secondary eyelid, like there was another membrane over the eyeball.
Right, like some.
You know what I'm saying? It looked like he blinked twice. When he blinked, it looked like the skin, what we would call our eyelid, came up, and then it looked like another thin membrane that covered the eye came up.
Like certain creatures have that go in the water.
Right. It looked like he had another membrane that covered his eye. But it may just been where his eyelid was so thick that it made it look that way.
Now,
plain as day.
Both of these creatures were basically the same color?
No, the big one wasn't as dark as the one in the tree. The one in the tree was black. I mean, that's what made me think it was a bear.
Mm.
And I turned and, looked, it was just that black. I'm seeing a bear. But the one when I come up to the laurel thicket, I mean, he was black, but he wasn't black. He had a lighter tone in him, especially on his back. Because when I first saw him in the laurel thicket, his back was to me. I wasn't seeing the front of him. When I first come up on that little thicket, all I saw was I could see his tail. I couldn't see his butt, the crease in his butt, but you could see that he had a crease there from the hair. the way that the hair laid,
Right.
you could tell that there was, they had a butt crack.
And then when he turned around, there wasn't no mistaking that he was definitely a male.
Buddy, when he turned around, I'm going to tell you, there was no doubt that cat was a male. When he stepped out of there ain't no doubt, brother. You told me, he was a proud individual.
Well, I'm really glad you come out and told your story, and keeping it in all these years. I guess it feels good to tell it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get so nervous when I don't know if, you'll be able to, I guess, when you listen back at it, you can tell. I was having a hard time at the beginning.
Yeah, there was emotion there, and I could tell it.
It was just, when I was first telling, I had chill bumps on my arms, and I was shaking.
I've been there before.
I was shaking. It was actually putting me back in the time, 10 years ago when I shot that thing, and I was shivering, telling the story to you at the beginning, and then and it got better. I've told the story and went over the story in my head 10 million times, Tom. 10 million times. I can't tell you how many times that I have thought of that. I can't tell you how many times that when I went in the woods to hunt, I was like, wonder if today will be the day that I see another one of them damn things.
Every noise you hear, you got to look and see.
Oh, my gosh. Every little twig break. You know that it's a squirrel, but you got to look.
Got to make sure.
You're like, oh, that's just a squirrel, that's a chipmunk. But you're going to look because you want to know what that is. And then one day you might turn around and look, and there's another 8.5 foot tall cat. Oh, he was easy 8 plus. He was above the way the mountain was. He was maybe on the way the grade of the mountain was. He was probably above me 5 foot. I was looking uphill to him at about at a little bit of an angle, and he was probably 5 foot taller, up to grade.
Right.
And then when he stood up, he had, I know the little thicket was 7 foot tall little thicket.
Right, we have them like that around here. See, our laurel thickets are the same way. They're 7, 8 foot tall. Sometimes bigger, according where you're at.
Yeah. And he was in that little, and I don't know if he heard me coming in the snow, because I wasn't being quiet when I was walking in the snow. I'm tromping through the snow. I'm breathing hard, and I'm looking at every 4 or 5 footprints I'm stopping, and I'm like, because at first, when I first go up the mountain, I'm taking 3 steps before I find another footprint. And I'm kind of, and I'm going up the hill, and I'm like, gosh almighty, where's this guy going? And I'm kind of getting out of breath. Well, I walk, 20 or 30 yards, and I stop for a second and take, a little bit of a breather, and I walk 20 or 30 more yards, and I stop and take a breather, and I wasn't quiet about it at all. And then the footsteps started getting a lot closer. They weren't near as far apart. They started getting a lot closer together. There was about a stride and a half of mine. But looking at the size of that animal, just a normal stride for him was probably 2 strides of mine.
Right. Now, most of them, like that one my dad seen, we calculated hit at about 8 foot strides. And if you're taking 3 steps in between, you're talking about 8, 9 foot strides there. That's a big step.
That's a big step. And he had hair. There was probably 6 inches of snow, 5 to 6 inches of snow on top of the mountain when this happened. And because his feet, he had hair all the way down his legs, and I couldn't even see his feet because of the snow. Him standing in the snow. But he had hair. His hair was real thick on the front of his legs. But now he didn't have, the hair wasn't as thick in his groin area. The hair was real thick on his legs and on his hips. But like underneath his arms, the hair wasn't as thick. It was kind of thin, and I could actually see his skin underneath his arms
What color was the skin?
His skin was like a tan, like a real tan white man would be. It wasn't white, but it wasn't it was more tan. Like maybe like an Indian person would look.
Right. How about his?
Like the skin color of like a Native American, kind of a darker skin tone.
How about its chest? Was there a lot of hair on its chest?
A lot of hair on his chest, on the at the neck, right where the neck would be, and down toward the like his belly button.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess wherever his belly button would be. I mean, it was hard. It's hard. He was just so damn big. You think that's where his belly button should be, but is it really where his belly button is? You don't know. But his chest was covered in hair, good. But I never saw his nipples. I never saw the nipples on his chest. They were covered in hair, and he had no neck, none. And the hair covering his mouth it wasn't like he had a real heavy mustache. The mustache, there was hair there between his nose and his top lip, but there's a pretty good gap between his nose and his mouth.
The mouth kind of sets more lower.
Our nose and our mouth is pretty close together.
Yeah.
His nose and his mouth was quite a bit separate. Quite a bit, probably 2 inches or better between the bottom of his nose to his top lip. There was a pretty good gap there, and it had hair there, but it wasn't thick, real thick hair. And his skin was like on his face was just like an Indian, kind of looked like a Native American.
Was there any hair on his cheekbones?
Yeah, he had a beard. I mean, his whole face from his cheeks down, it almost looked like he had a beard.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like the hair on his face came down to between his two breasts. The hair flowed down that way, and then so that's the way the hair flowed. You know what I'm saying? It's like it was not like it was combed. I guess you could say it was like it was combed that direction. The hair flowed that downward. Not from side to side. It looked like he had groomed himself, like maybe he took his hands and he would wipe down
right
on his hair, and his hair laid
to a point.
Down to a point. But you could clearly see that he was a male, that he was a man.
Could you see the ears on the head at all?
Never saw the ears. Couldn't see the ears at all. There's too much hair.
Too much hair?
Too much hair.
Well,
he had a lot of hair on top of his head. It was long. It was long hair, Tom, long.
Well,
string. He looked like a horse's mane.
Well, see, I've often wondered that in the wintertime if their hair becomes thicker, much like other animals.
Well, I think they do. I think that this guy, because you could tell underneath his arms and in between his legs and his groin where the hair wasn't as thick. And I would think that they had done put on a winter coat. I mean, because their coat was nice. I mean, it was both of them. It wasn't matted, all nasty, have briars all in it, and, But he had on his hands. I'll never forget his hands. When he grabbed when he stood up, and he had to come out from behind the laurel bush. He took one step. That's all it took, was one step to come out from behind that laurel bush. And when he did, his hand kind of moved the laurel bush out of the way, and he had dark fingernails.
That's pretty interesting as well.
He had dark fingernails. They weren't clear like our fingernails. His fingernails were dark.
Did he have long type nails or just normal?
No, well, they were longer nails, but they weren't. They didn't look like Dracula's nails or nothing like that. I mean,
They wasn't like claws, though.
they weren't claws. No, they weren't claws.
They was like
They were
long human
claws.
nails.
They just looked like long human nails, and they were dark. And it may be just where they were dirty.
True, could be where they dig or whatever.
Like if he had been, like he was, like, because I don't know what he was doing behind that laurel bush. If he was hiding from me or if he was digging. You know, I never really paid much attention behind the laurel bush. After my ass went to running.
Yeah, I'd say so. I've been.
When I finally took off running, when I pulled the trigger and I shot and I turned to run, I only looked back twice. And the first time that I looked back, I saw him pick up the other one, and then the second time I looked back, they were going up the cliff. And the second time when I look back, I want to say that I stopped, but I don't know that I stopped. I can't say that I stopped.
Well,
I can't say that I stopped.
Well, that was
but seeing him, when your ass is scared like that. And I tell you, I never smelled nothing. Never smelled nothing, Tom.
Well, now the ones I've been around.
No skunk. I never smelled. Everybody talks about they got this odor. They stink. I never smelled nothing.
Well, the ones I've been around's not smelled neither, but I've heard other people describe them as being smelly. But I've not smelled anything like that I can remember.
Never smelled nothing. Never smelled nothing.
Well, I sure appreciate you sharing your experience with us, and I know you've probably held it in, like you say, almost 10 years now, and it's good to get it out there. Of course, there'll be some people who won't believe it, but
I don't care whether they believe it or not, Tom.
I
don't care. I can, if this is still on tape for anybody out there that hears it. If you don't believe it, have a good day. Appreciate you listening, but have a good day. I don't care that they believe me.
That's the best way to be.
I know what I saw, and I know what I done that day. And people can criticize me for shooting the damn thing. I did what I thought was right at the time.
Well, yeah, sure. You thought you was in danger.
Right. Whether that's right or wrong, I felt in danger. I thought that when he come out from behind that laurel bush and then that one growled at me in the tree, it just the way, I don't know, it's just the way I was holding the gun. But I slung up the scope on the one in the tree, and Tom, I pulled the trigger in less than a second.
Right.
I threw that scope up there, and she was so, I'm calling her she, still, because I believe it was a female, that I threw the scope up there, and she was so close, she popped right up in the scope.
Man.
Instantly. And I was dead center, and I pulled the trigger. There was, before I done clicked the safety off before I even looked at her in the scope.
Well, you was in a dangerous situation, that's for sure. There's a possibility nothing would have happened. You could have got out, but there's a chance you could have got hurt as well. So, you had to do what you had to do.
Oh, you're right, bud. You're right.
But
if that's all, Tom, I appreciate you listening,
buddy. I appreciate you sharing it with us and letting us be the ones that break the story and break the report because we try to treat everybody fair and we don't try to ridicule people. And I know some people, like you say, they won't believe it, but when you experienced it for yourself, it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks.
That's right. I know. I don't care. Like I said, I don't care whether or not someone believes me. But for the people that have either had a sighting or had an experience and believe it, this is what and know that they exist. This is what happened to me on the day before Thanksgiving in 2003.
Well,
I can just be as truthful as I can be and tell people this is what happened to me, and this is what was said by the game warden, and this is what was said by two government officials that I have no idea what agency they belong to, and that's what was said to me.
Okay, well, if you have any more experiences or have any more contact from the wildlife or anybody else about it, let us know.
I will do, bud.
And but I sure appreciate it. And you have a good day. And if you need me, you just call me back.
Okay, you have a good day, son.
All right, you too. Talk to you later.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.